Hello, it's been a while. Hope you've been doing well. It's been almost a month since I last showed up here, and today I'm just coming back with something simple and calm. This session is from Class 11 Biology, Chapter 15 Body Fluids and Circulation. No pressure, no overthinking. Just a space for you to pause, reset, and reconnect. So, wherever you are right now, sit back, relax, and just listen. Let the words flow, let your mind settle, and take only what you need from this moment. Take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's begin. Chapter 15 Body Fluids and Circulation. You have learned that all living cells have to be provided with nutrients, oxygen, and other essential substances. Also, the waste or harmful substances produced have to be removed continuously for healthy functioning of tissues. It is therefore essential to have efficient mechanism for the movement of these substances to the cell and from the cell. Different group of animals have evolved different method for this transport. Simple organisms like sponges and sedentates circulate water from their surroundings through their body cavities to facilitate the cell to exchange their substances. More complex organisms use special fluids within their bodies to transport such materials. Blood is the most commonly used body fluid by most of the higher organisms, including humans, for this purpose. Another body fluid, lymph, also help in the transport of the certain substances. In this chapter, you will learn about the composition and properties of blood and lymph, and the mechanism of circulation of blood is also explained herein. Blood. Blood is a special connective tissue consisting of a fluid matrix plasma and formed element. Plasma. Plasma is a straw-colored, viscous fluid constituting nearly 55% of the blood. 90 to 92% of plasma is water, and protein contributes 6 to 8% of it. Fibrinogen, globulin, albumin are the major proteins. Fibrinogen are needed for clotting or coagulation of blood. Globulins primarily are involved in defenses mechanisms of the body, and the albumins help in osmotic balance. Plasma also contains small amount of minerals like sodium, calcium, magnesium, bicarbonate, and chlorine, etc. Glucose, amino acid, lipids, etc. are also present in the plasma as they are always in transit in the body. Factors for coagulation or clotting of blood are also present in the plasma in an inactive form. Plasma without the clotting factor is called serum. Formed elements. Erythrocytes, leukocytes, and platelets are collectively called formed elements, and they constitute nearly 45% of the blood. Erythrocyte or red blood cells, RBC, are the most abundant of all the cells in blood. A healthy adult man has, on an average, 5 million to 5.5 million of RBCs of blood. RBCs are formed in the red bone marrow in the adult. RBCs are devoid of nucleus in most of the mammals and are biconcave in shape. They have a red colored iron containing complex protein called hemoglobin, hence the color and name of their cells. A healthy individual has 12 to 16 gram of hemoglobin in every 100 milliliter of blood. These molecules play a significant role in transport of respiratory gases. RBCs have an average lifespan of 120 days, after which they are destroyed in the spleen, that is, graveyard of RBCs. Leukocytes are also known as white blood cells, WBC, as they are colorless due to the lack of hemoglobin. They are nucleated and are relatively lesser in number, which average 6,000 to 8,000 of blood. Leukocytes are generally short-lived. We have two main categories of WBCs: granulocytes and agranulocytes. Neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils are different type of granulocytes, while lymphocytes and monocytes are the agranulocytes. Neutrophils are the most abundant cells, 60 to 65% of the total WBC, and basophils are the least, 0.5 to 1% among them. Neutrophils and monocytes, 6 to 8%, are phagocytic cells which destroy foreign organisms entering the body. Basophils secrete histamine, serotonin, heparin, etc., and are involved in inflammatory reaction. Eosinophil 2 to 3% resist infections and are also associated with allergic reaction. Lymphocyte 20 to 25% are of two major type, B and T types. Both B and T lymphocytes are responsible for immunoresponse of the body. Platelets, also called thrombocytes, are cell fragments produced from megakaryocytes, special cell in the bone marrow. Blood normally contain 150,000 to 350,000 platelets. Platelets can release variety of substances, most of which are involved in the coagulation of clotting of blood. Reduction in their number can lead to clotting disorders, which will lead to excessive loss of blood from the body. Blood groups. As you know, blood of human beings differ in certain aspects, through it appear to be similar. Various type of grouping of blood has been done. Two such groupings, the ABO and RH, are widely used all over the world. ABO group. ABO grouping is based on the presence or absence of the two surface antigens, that is, chemicals that can induce immune response on the RBCs, namely A and B. Similarly, the plasma of different individuals contain two natural antibodies, proteins produced in response to antigens. The distribution of antigens and antibodies in the four groups of blood A, B, AB, and O are given in the table. You probably know that during blood transfusion, any blood cannot be used. The blood of a donor has to be carefully matched with the blood of the recipient before any blood transfusion to avoid severe problem of clumping, that is destruction of RBCs. The donor compatibility is also shown in the table of on 15.1. In the table 15.1, blood groups and donor compatibility. Blood groups A has antigens on RBC, A, antibodies in plasma, anti-B. Donor group is A and O. In blood group B, antigen on RBCs is B, antibodies in plasma, anti-A. Donor group is B and O. Blood group AB, antigen on RBCs A and B, antibodies in plasma, nil. Donor group AB, A, B, O. Blood group donor, blood group O, antigen on RBCs nil, antibodies in plasma, anti-A and B, donor group O. From the above mentioned table, it is evident that group O blood can be donated to person with any other blood group, and hence O group individual are called universal donor. Person with AB group can accepted blood from person with AB as well as the other group of blood. Therefore, such person are called universal recipient. RH group. Another antigen, the RH antigen similar to one present in rhesus monkey, hence RH, is also observed on the surface of RBCs of majority, nearly 80% of humans. Such individuals are called RH positive. And those in whom this antigen is absent are called RH negative. An RH negative person is exposed to RH positive blood will form specific antibodies against the RH antigen. Therefore, RH group should also be matched before transfusion. A special case of RH incompatibility mismatching has been observed between the Rh negative blood of a pregnant woman with Rh positive blood of the fetus. Rh antigen of the fetus do not get exposed to Rh negative blood of the mother in the first pregnancy, as the two bloods are well separated by the placenta. However, during the delivery of the first child, there is a possibility to exposure of the maternal blood to small amount of the Rh positive blood from the fetus. In such cases, the mother start preparing antibodies against Rh antigen in her blood. In case of her subsequent pregnancies, the Rh antibodies from the mother Rh negative can leak into the blood of the fetus Rh positive and destroy the fetus RBCs. This could be fatal to the fetus or could cause severe anemia and jaundice to the baby. This condition is also called erythroblastosis fetalis. This can be avoided by administering anti-Rh antibodies to the mother immediately after the delivery of the first child. Coagulation of blood. You know that when you cut your finger or hurt yourself, your wound does not continue to bleed for a long time. Usually the blood stops flowing after some time. Do you know why? Blood exhibits coagulation or clotting in response to an injury or trauma. This is a mechanism to prevent excessive loss of blood from the body. You would have observed a dark reddish brown scum formed at the site of a cut or an injury over a period of time. It is a clot or coagulum formed mainly of a form of thread called fibrin, in which dead and damaged formed elements of bloods are trapped. Fibrins are formed by the conversion of inactive fibrinogen in the plasma by the enzyme thrombin. Thrombin in turn are formed from another inactive substances present in the plasma called prothrombin. An enzyme complex, thrombokinase, is required for the above reaction. This complex is formed by a series of linked enzyme reaction cascade process involving a number of factors present in the plasma in an inactive state. An injury or a trauma stimulate the platelets in the blood to release certain factors which activate the mechanism of coagulation. Certain factor releases by the tissue at the site of injury also can initiate coagulation. Calcium ion play a very important role in clotting. Lymph, tissue fluid. As the blood passes through the capillaries in tissues, some water along with many small water-soluble substances move out into the spaces between the cells of tissues, leaving the large protein and most of the formed element in the blood vessels. This fluid released out is called the interstitial fluid or tissue fluid. It has the same mineral distribution as that in plasma. Exchange of nutrients, gases, etc. between the blood and the cells always occur through this fluid. An elaborate network of vessels called the lymphatic system collect this fluid and drain it back to the major vein. The fluid present in the lymphatic system is called the lymph. Lymph is a colorless fluid containing specialized lymphocytes which are responsible for the immune responses of the body. Lymph is also an important carrier for nutrients, hormones, etc. Fats are absorbed through lymph in the lacteal present in the intestinal villi. Circulatory pathway. The circulatory pattern are of two types, open or closed. Open circulatory system is present in arthropods and mollusca, in which blood pumped by the heart passes through the large vessels into open space or body cavity called sinuses. Annelids and chordates have a closed circulatory system in which the blood pumped by the heart is always circulated through a closed network of blood vessels. This pattern is considered to be more advantageous as the flow of fluid can be more precisely regulated. All vertebrates possess a muscular chamber heart. Fish have two-chamber heart with an atrium and a ventricle. All vertebrate possess a muscular chamber heart. Fishes have a two-chamber heart with an atrium and ventricle. Amphibian and the reptiles, except crocodiles, have a three-chamber heart with two atria and a single ventricle, whereas crocodile, birds, and mammal possess a four-chamber heart with two atria and two ventricles. In fishes, the heart pumped out deoxygenated blood, which is oxygenated by the gills and supplied to the body parts, from where deoxygenated blood is returned to the heart, single circulation. In amphibians and reptiles, the left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the gills, lungs, skin, and the right atrium gets the deoxygenated blood from other body parts. However, they get mixed up in the single ventricle, which pump out mixed blood. Incomplete double circulation. In birds and mammals, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood received by the left and right atria, respectively, passes on the ventricles of the same sides. The ventricle pumped in out without any mixing up. That is, two separate circulatory pathways are present in these organisms. Hence, this animal have double circulation. Let us study the human circulatory system. Human circulatory system. Human circulatory system, also called the blood vascular system, consists of a muscular chambered heart, a network of close branching blood vessels and blood, the fluid which is circulated. Heart, the mesodermally derived organ, is situated in the thoracic cavity, in between the two lungs, slightly tilted to the left. It has the size of clenched fist. It is protected by a double-walled membranous bag, pericardium enclosing the pericardial fluid. Our heart has four chambers, two relatively small upper chamber called atria and two larger lower chamber called ventricles. A thin muscular wall called the inner atrial septum separates the right and left atria, whereas a thick walled and inner ventricle septum separate the left and right ventricles. The atrium and the ventricle of the same sides are also separated by a thick fibrous tissues called the atrioventricular septum. However, each of their septa are provided with an opening through which the two chambers of the same side are connected. The opening between the right atrium and the right ventricle is guarded by a valve formed of three muscular flaps or cusps, the tricuspid valves, whereas a bicuspid or mitral valve guarded the opening between the left atrium and the left ventricles. The opening of the right and left ventricles into the pulmonary artery and the aorta respectively are provided with the semilunar valves. The valve in the heart allow the flow of blood only in one direction, that is from the atria to the ventricles and from ventricles to the pulmonary artery or aorta. These valves prevent any backward flow. The entire heart is made up of cardiac muscle. The wall of ventricles are much thicker than that of the atria. A specialized cardiac musculature called the nodal tissue is also distributed in the heart. A patch of this tissue is present in the right upper corner of the right atrium called the sinoatrial nodes, SAN. Another mass of this tissue is in the lower left corner of the right atrium close to the atrioventricular septum called the atrioventricular node, AVN. A bundle of nodal fiber, atrioventricular bundle, AV bundle, continue form the AVN, which passes through the atrioventricular septa to emerge on the top of the interventricular septum and immediately divides into a right and left bundle. These branches give rise to minute fiber throughout the ventricular musculature of the respective site and are called Purkinje fibers. The nodal musculature has the ability to generate action potential without any external stimuli, that is, it is auto-excitable. However, the number of action potential that could be generated in a minute vary at different part of the nodal system. The SAN can generate the maximum number of action potential, that is 70 to 75 minute, and is responsible for initiating and maintaining the rhythmic contractile activity of the heart. Therefore, it is called the pacemaker. Our heart normally beats 70 to 75 times in a minute, average 72 beats per minute. Cardiac cycle. How does the heart function? Let us take a look. To begin with, all the four chambers of heart are in a relaxed state. That is, they are in a joint diastole. As the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are open, blood from the pulmonary vein and vena cava flows into the left and right ventricles, respectively, through the left and right atria. The semilunar valves are closed at this stage. The SAN now generate an action potential which stimulates both the atria to undergo a simultaneously contraction, the atrial systole. This increases the flow of blood into the ventricles by about 30%. The action potential is conducted to the ventricular side by the AVN and AV bundle, from wherever the bundle of hairs transmitted it through the entire ventricular musculature. This causes the ventricular muscular to contract ventricular systole. The atria undergoes relaxation, that is diastole, coinciding with the ventricular systole. Ventricular systole increase the ventricular pressure, causing the closure of tricuspid and bicuspid valve during the attempted backflow of blood into the atria. As the ventricular pressure increases further, the semilunar valves guarding the pulmonary artery, right side, and the aorta, left side, are forced open, allowing the blood in the ventricles to flow through these vessels into the circulatory pathway. The ventricles now relaxed, ventricular diastole, and the ventricular pressure falls, causing the closure of semilunar valves, which prevent the backflow of blood into the ventricles. As the ventricular pressure declines further, the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are paused open by the pressure in the atria, exerted by the blood which was being emptied into them by the veins. The blood now once again move freely to the ventricles. The ventricles and atria are now again in a relaxed joint diastole state. As earlier, soon the SAN generate a new action potential and the event described above and repeated in that sequences, and the process continues. The sequential event in the heart, which is cyclically repeated, is called the cardiac cycle and is consists of systole and diastole of both the atria and ventricle. As mentioned earlier, the heart beats 72 times per minute. That is, that many cardiac cycles are performed per minute. From this, it could be deduced that the duration of the cardiac cycle is 0.8 seconds. During a cardiac cycle, each ventricle pumps out approximately 70 milliliter of blood, which is called the stroke volume. The stroke volume multiplied by the heart rate, no number of beats per minute, give the cardiac output. Therefore, the cardiac output can be defined as the volume of blood pumped out by each ventricles per minute, an average 5,000 milliliter to 5 liter in a healthy individual. The body has the ability to alter the stroke volume as well as the heart rate and thereby the cardiac output. For example, the cardiac output of an athlete will be much higher than that of an ordinary man. During each cardiac cycle, two prominent sounds are produced which can be easily heard through a stethoscope. The first heart sound lub is associated with the closure of the tricuspid and bicuspid valve, whereas the second heart sound dub is associated with the closure of the semilunar valves. These sounds are of clinical diagnostic significance. Electrocardiogram, ECG. You are probably familiar with this scene from a typical hospital television shows. A patient is hooked up to a monitoring machine that shows voltage traces on a screen and makes the sound pip 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 pee as the patient goes into cardiac arrest. This type of machine's electrocardiography is used to obtain an electrocardiogram, ECG. The ECG is a graphical representation of the electrical activity of the heart during cardiac cycle. To obtain a standard ECG, as shown in the figure, a patient is connected to a machine with three electrical leads, one to each wrist and to the left ankle. They're continuously monitoring the heart activities. For a detailed evaluations of the heart function, multiple leads are attached to the chest region. Here we will talk only about a standard ECG. ECG peak in the ECG is identified with a letter from P to T that corresponds to a specific electrical activity of the heart. The P wave represents the electrical excitation or depolarization of the atria, which leads to the contraction of both the atria. The QRS complex represents the depolarization of the ventricles, which initiate the ventricular contraction. The contraction starts shortly after Q and marks the beginning of the systole. The T wave represents the return of the ventricles from excited to normal state repolarization. The end of the T wave marks the end of systole. Obviously, by continuing the number of QRS complexes that occur in a given time period, one can determine that heartbeat rate of an individual, since the ECGs obtained from different individuals have roughly the same shape for a given lead configuration. Any deviations from these shapes indicates a possible abnormality or disease. Hence, it is of a great clinical significance. Double circulation. The blood flows strictly by a fixed route through blood vessels, the arteries and veins. Basically, each arteries and vein consist of three layers: an inner lining of squamous endothelium, the tunica intima, a middle layer of smooth muscles and elastic fibers, the tunica media, and an external layer of fibrous connective tissues with collagen fibers, the tunica externa. The tunica media is comparatively thin in the veins. As mentioned earlier, the blood pumped by the right ventricles enter the pulmonary artery, whereas the left ventricle pump blood into the aorta. The deoxygenated blood pumped into the pulmonary artery is passed on the lungs, from where the oxygenated blood is carried by the pulmonary vein into the left atrium. This pathway constituent the pulmonary circulation. The oxygenated blood entering the aorta is carried by a network of arteries, arterioles and capillaries to the tissues, from where the deoxygenated blood is controlled by a system of venulas. Veins and vena cava are emptied into the right atrium. This is the systemic circulation. The systemic circulation provides nutrients, oxygen, and other essential substances to the tissue and takes carbon dioxide and other harmful substances away from elimination. A unique vascular connection exists between the digestive tract and liver called hepatic portal system. The hepatic portal vein carried blood from intestine to the liver before it is delivered to the systemic circulation. A special coronary system of blood vessels is present in our body exclusively for the circulation of blood to the form and cardiac musculature. Regulation of cardiac activity. Normal activities of the heart are regulated intrinsically, that is, auto-regulated by specialized muscles, nodal tissues. Hence, the heart is called myogenic. A special neutral center is the medulla oblongata can moderate the cardiac function through autonomic nervous system. Neural signal through the sympathetic nerves can increase the rate of heartbeat, the strength of ventricular contraction, and thereby the cardiac output. On the other hand, parasympathetic neural signals, another component of ANS, decreases the rate of heartbeat, speed of conduction of action potential, and thereby the cardiac output. Adrenal medullary hormones can also increase the cardiac output. Disorder of circulatory system, high blood pressure, hypertension. Hypertension is the term for blood pressure that is higher than normal, 120 by 80. In this measurement, 120 millimeter mercury, that is millimeter of mercury pressure, is the systolic or pumping pressure, and 80 millimeter per mercury is the diastolic or resting pressure. If repeated check of blood pressure of an individual is 140 by 90, that is 140 over 90 or higher, it shows hypertension. High blood pressure leads to heart disease and also affects vital organs like brain and kidney. Coronary artery disease, CAD. Coronary artery disease is often referred to atherosclerosis, affects the vessels that supply blood to the heart muscles. It is caused by deposit of calcium, fat, cholesterol, and fibrous tissue, which makes the lumen of arteries narrower. Angina. It is also called angina pectoris. Symptoms of acute chest pain appear when no enough oxygen is reaching the heart muscles. Angina can occur in men and women of any age, but it is more common among the middle-aged and elderly. It occurs due to conditions that affect the blood flow. Heart failure. Heart failure means the state of heart when it is not pumping blood effectively enough to meet the need of the body. It is something called congestive heart failure because congestion of the lungs is one of the main symptoms of this disease. Heart failure is not the same as cardiac arrest when the heart stops beating, or a heart attack when the heart muscles is suddenly damaged by an inadequate blood supply. Summary. Vertebrates circulate blood or fluid connective tissues in their body to transport essential substances to the cell and to carry waste substances from there. Another fluid, lymph tissue fluid, is also used for the transport of certain substances. Blood comprises of fluid matrix, plasma and formed element. Red blood cells, RBC erythrocytes, white blood cells, WBC leukocytes, platelets, thrombocytes constitute the formed element. Blood of humans are grouped into A, B, AB, and O system based on the presence of absence of two surface antigens, AB, on the RBCs. Another blood groups is also done based on the presence or absence of another antigen called rhesus factor RH on the surface of RBCs. The spaces between cells in the tissues contain a fluid derived from blood called tissue fluid. This fluid called lymph is almost similar to blood except for the protein contact. For the protein, this fluid called lymph is almost similar to blood except for the protein contained and the formed element. All vertebrates and a few invertebrates have a closed circulatory system. Our circulatory system consists of a muscular pumping organ, heart, and network of vessels, and a fluid blood. Heart has two atria and two ventricles. Cardiac musculature is auto-excitable. Sinoatrial nodes at the end generate the maximum number of action potential per minute, 70 to 75 per minute, and therefore it set the pace of the activities of the heart. Hence, it is called pacemaker. The action potential causes the atria and the ventricles to undergo contraction systole, followed by their relaxation diastole. The systole forces the blood to move from the atria to the ventricle and to the pulmonary artery and the aorta. The cardiac cycle is formed by sequential event in the heart, which is cyclically repeated and is called the cardiac cycle. A healthy person shows 72 such cycle per minute. About 70 milliliter of blood is pumped out by each ventricle during a cardiac cycle, and it is called the stroke or beat volume. Volume of blood pumped out by each ventricles of heart per minute is called the cardiac output, and it is equal to the product of stroke. Volume and heart rate approx 5 liters. The electrical activities of the heart can be recorded from the body surface by using electrocardiograph, and the recording is called electrocardiogram, ECG, which is of clinical importance. We have a complete double circulation, that is two circulatory pathways, namely pulmonary and systemic, are present. The pulmonary circulation starts by the pumping of deoxygenated blood by the right ventricle, which is carried to the lungs, where it is oxygenated and returned to the left atrium. The systemic circulation starts with the pumping of oxygenated blood by the left ventricle to the aorta, which is carried to all the body tissues, and the deoxygenated blood from there is collected by the veins and returned to the right atrium. To the heart is auto-excitable. Its function can be moderated by neural and hormonal mechanisms. And that's the chapter done. If you made it till here, thank you truly. It shows your consistency and effort. Take a moment, relax, and let it sink in. If this helped you, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next chapter. Keep going. You are doing great. Thank you.